David Corenswet's fandom is currently in a self-made spiral, civil war, fan turning against fan, people calling themselves David's wife are arguing with David's actual wife and on-screen girlfriend, and it's all gotten pretty dramatic over something that completely could have been avoided if people acted normally. Now, to talk about where we got with geopolitics, people turning against one another, and potentially losing a large portion of the terminally online DCU fan base, we have to start from where this kind of began in early 2025 and the run-up to the Superman reboot's release. Now, in this run-up, people who were terminally online tried to pass off going to see the new movie as a form of activism against what's going on in Gaza, which is really weird because James Gunn was explicit about it not being based on the Middle East. In fact, this nebulously fictionalized Middle East story plot point is not only not supposed to emulate what's going on in Gaza, but was originally based in a fictional part of Eastern Europe, which was then changed because James Gunn didn't want to be associated with what's going on in Ukraine. He wanted to avoid geopolitics, which is weird because he hired a guy who was part of the CIA's invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan to help co-write this whole project. Remember the hypno glasses? Yeah, that was Tom's idea. Again, I've already shown the video where he brags to Frank Miller about torturing people in the Middle East and how it doesn't actually get anything, and he thinks it's hilarious.
Realistic, like Batman's famous thing, Frank, you did this better than anyone, is to when he's interrogating someone, is to dangle them off a building. Yeah. And then, open his hands up and like, and then they just start confessing. That doesn't actually work.
He's not a very decent person. So, of course, the people who kept trying to say that this was some form of activism were gaslighting themselves and others. People then started using what's going on with, like, what Hawk Girl does, which I've covered in a video, to joke about a fictionalized version of what's going on in Gaza, and they started actually, like, role-playing, as though everything, the real-life genocide that's happening, to this day, by the way, it has not changed, was a joke and a punchline for them to LARP, to play around in, like a D&D session. Those are real people, those are real women, men, and children who are being just putting through the worst possible circumstances you can, largely ignored by Western media, and these people were both pretending that what they were doing was activism and then kind of making fun of victims for their own playtime, for their own make-believe, which is so disgusting. But then it got worse. These people were so obsessed with trying to prove that they were the best people ever that they posed as David to sign a petition condemning Israel. Now, it's come out that that was not David, and in fact, David and his IRL wife, the person he's actually betrothed to, actually hold the opposite opinion, as does Rachel Brosnahan, I don't know how you say her last name, who also supports Israel, as does Jimmy Olsen, who's getting his own TV show instead of Wonder Woman or Batgirl. Now, this is only the second David and Rachel controversy to come out from this terminally online fandom in the last couple months, because they also spent a good portion of the summer trying to spread the rumor that David and Rachel had cheated on their respective spouses and would be getting divorces and hooking up so that they could continue their weird, the real world doesn't exist, I only live in my movie, let me only talk about that, and if I can make the real world more like that, then good. So at the same time that they're pretending that stuff that's going on in Gaza is fictional and they can just play around with it, they're trying to get their lead actors to have an affair, or at least spread the rumor that they did, to ruin their real-life relationship so they'll be with them. It was a whole weird situation, and as much as you may dislike Henry Cavill or Amy Adams or Zack Snyder, at least between 2013 and 2016, you didn't see fans trying to spread rumors that Amy Adams was having an affair so that they could keep watching attractive people kiss each other in real life. It's very parasocial, very weird. And it continues further. People were so distraught by finding out about all of this whole weird, oh, it's actually not activism to buy a popcorn bucket. I'm shocked. I mean, frankly, if you were dumb enough to think what you were doing was activism, you're kind of dumb. So maybe you kind of deserve this sobriety moment. But they started turning against each other saying, oh, I survived David Corenswet's cancellation. And they started saying that it was basically harder to be a fan of David on the 5th of November than it was to be someone who lives in Palestine ever, which is both insane and really insensitive. And of course, once they all started getting called out, they're like, hey guys, let's not make this about David or about activism. Let's just focus on the character. And it's like, no. You guys spent 9 months, the amount of time it takes to bring a child to full term, shitting on people because they didn't want to watch your corporate slop that you pretended was activism. So yeah, the people who spent the better part of a year trying to pass off corporate consumerism as activism when it never was, enter the Benedict Cumberbatch quote for you right there, are shocked to discover they gaslit themselves into thinking that what they were doing was some form of activism. The same way they try to say that, like, oh, David saves people like a firefighter, Henry saves people like a policeman because he's a bad, bad man. Henry saves people the same way David does, by acting in front of a green screen and on a set. Like, motherfucker, this isn't real. And if we're being pedantic, Henry's first on-screen save is in a fire, so he's like the National Guard or the Coast Guard. But he is doing firework. But again, they don't actually want to have a real conversation. They just want to moralize their personal preferences, which they tried to do with this movie, and it backfired colossally because the rest of Twitter and the internet was like, holy shit, are DCU heads mentally unstable? And the answer is yes, as I'm now recounting a year's worth of mania to you. Again, all of this insanity happened in between calling anyone who didn't like the new movie either a monkey, because that's what James Gunn gave them the right to do with his ridiculous film script, or just actual racial slurs, which is kind of a whole thing. Anyone with a brain could have seen that letting a CIA dude write a script wouldn't be a form of political activism. Under David Zaslav, you're very unlikely to get activism in general. Just going to be honest with you on that one. And all of this is coming to a head. You know, all of these fake activists are kind of shocked. Some of them are doubling down on Fandom, saying he deserves fans who are more loyal. They have the whole Church of Corenswet or whatever, which is fucking crazy. And they're doubling down on being extra toxic if you call anyone out. Kudos where it is. Some people are like, I stand on business. If he's not about my beliefs, then I'm not going to support him. However, all of this could have been avoided had they not just presumed things about David that he's never once tried to say. Anyway, having the lead actor of your reboot, aside from John Cena, who's associated with the swastika now, congratulations on that, be very pro-Zionist, which is a controversial opinion online, as is his IRL wife, as is his on-screen girlfriend, as is Jimmy Olsen, who's also a misogynist on screen and a Zionist in real life, where he was liking the same sort of Instagram posts that Stranger Things kid with the horrible bowl haircut that everyone's always been clowning on was sharing. You know, the Zionism is sexy dude? That one. Yeah. So, safe to say that the Jimmy Olsen show was a dumbass idea to begin with, especially when you don't have a lot of the cornerstones of your DC franchise on the big screen. No Batman, no Wonder Woman. You're not even getting a Justice Society, let alone a League. You got, what is it? You got Dora the Explorer and James Gunn's brother running the Justice Gang. The whole thing's kind of a mess right now. It's not very mainstream. Marvel might be struggling, but they're not struggling this hard. And with the constant controversies online, the only thing that DC's had going for it over the last 9 years is terminally online fake activists defending it, and now they're turning on each other. So that Jimmy Olsen thing just got a lot worse, and frankly, it didn't seem that good to begin with. So yeah, I think that about covers it. In other news, don't try to weaponize fake activism against people you don't like. I shouldn't have to explain that Henry Cavill was talking about how people like to fabricate shit about celebrities they know nothing about, to a fandom that both did that about Henry and then tried to do it positively about David, and are reaping the negativity of both of those acts. Thanks for proving Henry right, and proving that you don't know anything about being kind, hopeful, or even mentally stable. And to everyone who didn't fall into this, and who doesn't project some form of activism onto consumerism, congratulations. We may be the last sane people watching TV today.